Welcome back. It's now time for us to go to a very conversation for the day. National security is never you can never end talking about, you can never stop rather talking about the issue of national security, because at the core, Section 14 of the Constitution provides that the security and welfare of the citizens is the first responsibility and the primary responsibility of government. We're just looking at this based on the fact that we now have a new chief of army staff. We lost our former chief of army staff. And then what this outlook will be like for all of us as far as issues. There have been gains and losses. We'll look at all of that with the team of experts that will be joining us, or our guests. But Bukola now joins us on the program. Well, I told you, she was caught up in traffic, Bukola. Finally.
Very good.
Maybe let's...
It's good to be able to make it after what seems to be a
I've never seen you dressed like this. This is nice.
Well, there's always a first, Jeffrey. Thank you. And
just calm down. Breathe.
Yeah, I'm breathing.
Breathe.
I'm breathing.
So what? How?
And just about 12 hours ago,
yes,
right here on this set, Jeffrey, we were talking, ampering for the Chief of Army Staff.
Yeah, exactly.
That he would return to continue his good work. But we didn't know that, he had exited to the other side. And that's rather sad. We commiserate with the family of the deceased, his wife and the 2 children that he left behind, and indeed the entire armed forces of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. It is indeed a great loss at this time where the armed forces seem to be making some progress in the fight against insurgency. Jeffrey, one would never have thought that would have happened, but quite a few guesses were being made, even prior to this announcement, when news reports of his ill health filtered in, and many were saying that he probably had died. But even at the decorating of the substantive or the acting Chief of Army Staff, there were reports also that he may have passed on, but it's really sad.
It's really sad.
Really sad.
What we always say is we thank him for his service.
We thank him for
he's done his bit, and we will always thank him for his service. Thank you, General Lagbaja. You've done your best for our country, and I'm sure the people in charge now will build on your legacy. And then back to you, Bukola. Tell us what happened. I cannot miss that gist before we get started, just in 1 second. So,
of course.
Our producer was putting up that video for us. So what happened?
Jeff,
because it's part of our job to report traffic. So people may be stuck as well right now. So we need to tell them what's going on.
Traffic advisory. Lagos Ibadan Expressway is chaotic. Inbound Lagos, particularly from Wawa, when you begin to drive from that end, the traffic has begun to build up already. And it's really annoying that articulated vehicles are now driving against traffic on the road inbound Lagos. They are also facing those, coming to Lagos as they drive outward Lagos. So it's really chaotic. And on this other side as well, we really don't know what is responsible for the traffic. Seems more like witchcraft, because when you burst out of the congestion, there's nothing ahead of you. When you come out of the Wawa gridlock as well, there's nothing ahead of you. But then you join the traffic again from that point where the rehabilitation work on the joints of the bridge, you join traffic again from that point. So it's really befuddling. One doesn't know what exactly is the cause of the traffic.
Yeah. So what would be your advice to the people coming into Lagos? Should they hold on for a bit? Are there alternative roads? You're familiar with that area, I'm not.
Even those outbound Lagos should, just hold on for a bit, maybe till about 10, if what they're going for is not absolutely important. But if they can brave the traffic and, wait for a resolution, then they can embark on their journey. But if it's not absolutely important, because driving amid traffic can be really exhausting.
It is. I hate it.
Yeah.
For
those coming to Lagos as well, you just may want to hold on for a bit before you get on your way.
One of the reasons I particularly hate being in traffic and being held up, because there was a day I supervised a project literally all through the night, and many years ago when I just started driving, and I was so tired I didn't know I was driving. They call it bumper to bumper, right? I didn't know I slept off in traffic. I did not know I slept off.
Exhaustion.
I was exhausted. The next thing I heard was boom. Apparently I had accelerated, hit the car in front of me. The shock woke me, and I accelerated even further. So my car hit the car in front of me. The car in front of me hit another car. Another car hit So we had like 4 cars in front of me that had been bashed because of what I did, and I just sat down there and looked at my life. I said, "What is
but
this?"
Thank God you're alive to
Yeah,
tell
I'm
the
alive
story.
today.
Many didn't live to tell such stories.
I'm grateful. Yeah. So it can be very horrific. Okay, Bukola, let's get to the business of the day. Apart from traffic, and it has to do with national security. We've talked about this issue of the chief of army staff passing on. And the issue of national security. I've been joined in the program by a retired Army General, General Henry Ayola. He joins us from our Abuja studio. General, thank you so much, sir, for coming on the program.
Yeah, good morning, Jeff. Good morning, Bukola. Thank you for bringing me on this morning.
All right, General, I know this is sometimes it's difficult. These conversations, you don't even know how to navigate it, because when a life is lost, there's nothing that can replace it. And this is a gentleman that has given the better part of his life to service of our nation, putting his life on the line, and eventually rose to the rank of the chief of army staff as a lieutenant general. But life happened, unfortunately, is no more with us. What was your first reaction when you heard of this development?
Yeah, thank you very much. Let me start, if you permit me, to express my condolence and join the well-meaning Nigerians all over the world and members of the armed forces, both out and in. Our condolences first to the family, immediate family of our dear General Taufik Abiodun Lagbaja, the wife and the children, and the wider family of Lagbaja. I also like to express my condolence to the officers and men of the Army and the armed forces at large. And of course, by extension, to the Ministry of Defense and the President, Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces. It's one of those things, like you said, life happens, and we don't have control over certain things, but we thank God that He had come this far. I mean, usually for us who join the profession of arms, this could happen anytime, and right from the day you started training, you start losing, it's a kind of continual attrition. Some people even die while in the academy. Some die as second lieutenant. So for somebody who has even gotten to lieutenant general, it's something to thank God for. But all the same, we don't want them to go. And particularly for a gallant officer who have showed exceptional leadership. And at a time when the army really needs a crack infantry officer that he was, it's certainly painful for us. So it was, for me, first a rude shock. But again, I mean, we process things when they happen. And in the final analysis, we know that if it's something we don't have power over, then we just submit to the will of God. Yeah.
Yeah, and memories of him, visiting the members of the armed forces and trying to, cheer up their morale, flood my mind right now, and we recall how dedicated he was, particularly to the fight against insurgency. But speaking of pigging back, even further down history, we remember Joseph Akahan, who also died in active service in a plane crash, I believe in 1968, according to history. And not too long ago, further down the line, Lieutenant General Ibrahim Attahiru also died in active service in a plane crash. It appears that office, beyond the battle that the gallant officers fight, there's also a battle against that office. I'd like you to speak to that. It appears a testy office, or is it disconnected from that office?
Well, okay, thank you. You went the historical lane. Actually, from the beginning of the history of the Nigerian Army, we started with the heads of the army were called General Officer Commanding. We had the first 4 who were British Major Generals, General Exam, the first, the second, Foster, the third, Mackenzie, and then the fourth was will be Everard. These were foreign officers, British officers. And then, of course, our own first indigenous was the General Officer Commanding General Johnson Aguiyi-Ironsi, But after that, then there was a changeover to the nomenclature to Chief of Army Staff, and the first was General Gowon, who then was a Lieutenant Colonel, and he was succeeded by the Lieutenant Colonel Joe Akahan that you mentioned, who actually was reported also to have died in a plane crash, during one of the time he was touring, just at the beginning of not too long into the Civil War. Yeah, well, first and foremost, we know that the military profession is inherently fraught with all kinds of risk and danger, and so that appears to look as if it's characteristic of the profession. But that's obvious by the sheer nature of the profession. Of course, then the office being the highest office in the army, is in the eyes of the storm. Is on the spot, and so eyes are on that whoever is sitting on that office. But I think people die in other offices and professions too. It's just that, of course, is the one that are highlighted that people get to know about. So I don't think there's anything particularly peculiar to the office of the Chief of Army Staff. I think it's just like we say, it's an accident, or it's one of those vagaries and vicissitudes of life, which no man can do much about. So I don't think it's particularly attached to the office. And of course, in this case, this is the first time that this one is due to illness. Okay, so I think that even puts it in the special category of his own. And you see, one thing I can say about that is the nature of our work is that you spend the whole of your life. The military is not just a profession, it's a whole life. You are spent and you spend, and sometimes you don't even know that you are sick, because you are driven from morning till night every day. And of course, you've been given that sense of invincibility, as it were. And so you don't even pay much attention to yourself. That's a tendency. And I think that's one first lesson for us to learn. Those of us who are out already and those who are inside, to know that, yes, we have this highest sacrifice to make for the nation. But then we must pay attention to ourselves, our health, how well we do. Inherently, of course, because you are always on your toes and all of that, the tendency is that you ignore even the signs that you get from your body. And because you've been trained to just keep moving on, usually the popular saying we say, "Meaka oka," that is what brought you. During training, that's the mentality that has been inculcated into you. That no matter what you are feeling, just keep moving. Just go on with the programs, And perhaps sometimes until you drop there, you don't even know anything was wrong with you. But I think it's a good lesson for us to learn, to know that there is a need, both for the leadership of the army now and the armed forces at large, to also, pay more attention to the health of the officers and the men when in service and outside service, so that we can avoid some of these things where they are avoidable.
All right, General, let's now piggyback on that. So look ahead. General Oluyede, Lieutenant General now, has taken over as the Chief of Army Staff. I'm sure substantive, because now that General Lagbaja has died or passed on. So in your view, because we've seen gains recorded as far as security is concerned, but we've also seen a couple of challenges, the recent one being the attack on a power installation. So there's a lot more work to be done. There's some unreported cases. There are the issue of the Chibok girls and all. We can go back, and in fact, at some point, I think Nigerians, we just got tired of particularly remembering, unfortunately, this girl, which is not supposed to be, because until every one of those children are back, we should not rest on our oars. We've seen gains in part of the country, but we've also seen raging assaults as well on our facilities. If you were to set an agenda, let's begin from there, on the new Lieutenant General, who is the Chief of Army Staff, working with his colleagues, what will be that agenda for Lieutenant General Oluyede?
Yes, thank you very much. Looking at the new Chief, Lieutenant General Olufemi Oluyede, yes, looking at his own background, they have so much in common. First, they are is a classmate to the immediate past chief, He's also an infantry officer. And looking at his CV, I see that he also had a lot of operational experience. He was also in the Operation Hadinkai in the Northeast and other, even outside and foreign operations. So he has all it takes to bring, an equal performance on board. And but of course, usually every commander will have his own style, at least some peculiarity that will differentiate him from another commander. So I expect that he will come in to revitalize the efforts, to give some new punches and maybe new strategies. Like you have said, one of the things I know General Lagbaja and the current Chief of Defense Staff, and in fact this set of service chiefs are brought on board, is that of becoming more preemptively offensive. And I think that is the way to go. Preemptive offensive is what we need, as a strategy, not waiting for terrorists or insurgents or bandits to act, and then we are only simply responding. But I think what you should do straight away, of course, I like the situation where you don't assume that you know when you come to a new office. It's always good to take briefs, no matter how close or what you think you know, because in leadership, whatever you know is never enough to tackle the extant problem. You still need to be briefed. You still need to get to, update yourself with the reality on the ground. And I think the next thing you should then do, that I would advise, is let's deploy as much of technology as we can. First, to locate these enemies of state, these either they are bandits or terrorists or insurgents. Let's locate them where they are. Let's have sufficient consolidated intelligence, of their locations and dispositions. And then we can then do a holistic planning, to take them on preemptively, not waiting until they do something, and that will put us on a perpetual preemptive offensive that will have, a whole lot of implications for our troops' morale, number one, and then even the morale of the enemy. But once we seize the initiative from them and we begin to go after them, then we put them on the defensive. Then, of course, they become jilted. They don't have freedom of action anymore. And I think that's one way to go, that's as a start point. And then, of course, like I said, there's a whole lot of military technology that can be brought on board to augment the efforts that have been on. There's so much about the Internet of military things today. There's so much about, of course, we've seen this set of service chiefs bringing on board armed unmanned area vehicles, which can be rejigged and configured in appropriately with our orbit and become more useful. When we recall the introduction of when the Germans introduced the combination of air-land warfare during the Second World War, what do they call it? Blitzkrieg. That's fast battle, which had a punch. Before the Allied forces could get an answer to it, it gave them some mileage, and some victory over the Allied forces. So we need to re-engineer and look at our organization itself vis-a-vis new platforms and weapon systems that can be brought in, and new military technologies of all kinds, across all the ranges, from armaments to communication to intelligence gathering to surveillance, and all of that. What we call C4 ISR, command control, communication, computer, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. So if they bring all that in, I think it will help to up our effort in all directions.
So we'll talk more, I believe, if there's time, about what needs to be provided in order to purchase all of those infrastructure, and indeed if they're available while they're not being deployed. But let's talk about the current effort. Just last month, the Defense Media Department reported the arrest of 164 terrorists, and I believe only last week or early this week, there were also reports of arrest of major terrorist bandits leader, amongst many that have also been arrested in recent times. And even yesterday, the Ministry of Justice is reporting the prosecution and conviction of 140 terrorists, I believe, and the dispensing of 560 terrorism cases. But the gains are not discernible in immediately agriculture, the agriculture sector, in seeing farmers return to their farms and in seeing, transport networks improved for the movement of agricultural produce. Why is that? Why do you believe that is the case?
Well, yeah, thank you very much. That is actually one of the immediate consequence of the long time operation of the bandits and the insurgents, how they have driven our farmers off the farms. So it's a long-standing effect where it happens that the effect is biting more now than before. And of course, it's going to take a while to be able to provide the needed security across our farmlands. I remember as Commander Operation Safe Haven, we got to that point where we had to establish watchtowers at the center of farmlands and deploy our officers and men to provide visible security so that the farmers are encouraged, because they can see the soldiers are on the ground, they can see the tower, and also whoever is going to cause trouble can see that there is, it's going to have a whole lot of problem to do that. So it helped a lot, but that was a local arrangement that we did. It can be done too, but you can, when you think of doing that for the whole nation in all, the size of our arable land in Nigeria, that is why we require a whole lot of manpower to do. But we have come to a point where nothing is too much to be done. Whatever we have to do to ensure food security, to tackle the challenge of food insecurity, I think we need to do it. What it will entail will be that we will need to bring a surge in our manpower of the army in particular, since most of these are land-based operations. We have to bring in this. We have to do something. If we have to do several streams of recruitment and turning out, more soldiers so that we can have more boots on ground, that will certainly be required if we are going to tackle the issue of food security very speedily. If we are not going to wait till when, the immediate effect we are looking for will happen over time. Okay, so that's my suggestion on that.
All right, General, I want to stay with the issue that Bukola raised that has to do with our farms, because we're talking about food inflation that has hit. Thank God it's coming down. It was at 40, but it's coming down. It came down to about 37. But the impact on the street maybe suggests otherwise from what the economists are looking at in terms of numbers. I know that when the president was campaigning, he promised a few things. And I can remember he talked about rangers and something they call forest guard force, as far as this is concerned. They also talked about, so now I'm talking about not just the army, now the entire security architecture to come to how we can be put together to help us get our farmers back to the farm. He talked about forest guard force or rangers. They also talked about repurposing or improving on the quality of our NSCDC officials so that they now provide security for our VIPs, and then our police will now do their work adequately to guard the place. We can also bring in the issue of state police in all of this. So why I'm asking this question, isn't it urgent enough, given what we're dealing with as a country, for the president to start implementing some of these promises he made aggressively across the country if food is that important?
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. I agree with you totally. But I'm aware that some of the states are already implementing this. I'm aware. I've seen some. I think what we need to do, maybe other states who have not joined the fray should, but then there has to be an articulated grand design and a framework to incorporate these paramilitary agencies and with these other agents. I've seen the hunters, the vigilantes, the rangers. I've seen them in some of the states, that I've been to in recent time. And so it's a matter of now having a grand plan in our security architecture at that operational and tactical level to incorporate these elements, and in a way that they will be multi-layered to ensure that they are effective. Because if you just throw rangers into the bush to say, oh, they should secure farms, first of all, we need to remind ourselves that the situation we are in didn't just start like this. It got to this point. It escalated to the point where the basic enforcement agencies could not handle. We need to remind ourselves that. So just throwing, say, Amotekun or some rangers, some locally arranged rangers into play will not get the work done, because there's so much they can do at that level. We know the level of training that you're required, that is required for you to combat what we are dealing with right now, to combat insurgents and bandits. It goes far beyond the level of training you can give to rangers in a short while, and the handling of weapons. Handling a weapon is not something that you get to do well in a short time. Excuse me. Because even for us who are trained all our lives for that, there are differing skills at different levels. So, and that's why it must be layered, it must be multi-layered, and it must be well articulated. It's not something that should happen, sporadically here and there. It has to be coordinated from the top. There has to be a proper framework, and everybody knows what his jurisdiction is, and at what level you can handle certain situations, and what backup you have. So that when it gets beyond your what you can handle, you know what level of support you can call and how to do so. The communication network and everything will be put in place. I think that arrangement is what needs to be done now. But already those efforts are on, in trickles in different parts of the country. But there is a need to have that, collaborative effort, and with a proper framework, with drills and checklists and procedures for doing those things. That's how security works. Yeah.
You talked about the successes, the gains that were recorded when you led Operation Safe Haven, and if that can be replicated, it would be important to increase recruitment in the army. Now, budgetary allocation over the last couple of years to security has probably been the biggest. And even if we looked at what has been allocated to security in 2024, we would also find a significant number. Why haven't we seen all of those elements that required, that we require for the success that we're looking for in the security sector, which is, important for our food security as well? Perhaps you could speak to that also.
Yeah, thank you very much. That is a very important question you have raised. It's been discussed again and again. When I hear people talking about the budget allocated to defense in particular, I laugh, because it's still a drop in the ocean. When you compare with what is required. When you hear those big figures, you just need to back out, and ask yourself, how much does an aircraft? You remember when 1 billion was given to the armed forces? I think all that we got from that, visibly, is the aircraft that we got from the US then. What was the name now? I will remember the name. That we got, that set. The Super Tucano jets, thank you very much. That virtually swallowed that whole money. And that's how it is, because security is very expensive. Platforms are very expensive. So when you're talking of big budget, by the time you take the overhead off, you look at most of the budget, look at them closely. Hardly does it come to maybe 15% for capital projects. 15% at best. And what can that get the armed forces? And you're talking of the whole armed forces, not just the army alone. So we still have so much more to, to put into maybe extra budgetary means. I've suggested that in many occasions about some states have already implemented the idea of security trust fund. There should be other extra budgetary means of boosting, and not just this reactionary acquisition that we're doing. We should be thinking in terms of programmed acquisition, where we look, what kind of battle will the armed forces be fighting in the next 10 years? What kind of equipment will they need to fight that kind of battle? How do we equip them for those kind of battles over a period of time? That's how nations build armed forces. No, of course, so far, because we have problems in our hands, we've just been responding to them and acquiring based on that. But
pardon me, sir,
we need to think beyond that now.
If I may come in there, even if you have rightly noted that there needs to be a significant increase in budgetary allocation to security, to defense, can you rule out corruption in that space? Because over the years, we've also heard reports of prioritizing infrastructure development over key issues of welfare for personnel, recruitment, and purchase of equipment. And we even recall the former Vice President had called in the past, that's former Vice President Yemi Osinbajo, for a second look, a scrutiny of the procurement process in the expenditure of budgetary allocation in the armed forces.
Yes, thank you very much. That again is a very critical issue. In fact, it borders on policy issue. Usually, the way nations run armed forces is you move from policy to strategies, to structures and institutions and systems, and then procedures, drills and routines and checklists. That's the way it works. Now, so the issue of what you do with the limited resources is a policy issue, and it borders on the area of higher defense management instruments and tools for higher defense management, which we need to put in place such that decision is not supposed to be one man's decision. It's not supposed to be one sub-component decision. It's not supposed to be one sub-sectoral decision. It's supposed to be a bigger picture that dovetails to each service now, and then the nation will have decided what are its priorities for that period. Okay, and for example, in the US, they have what they call the Unified Combatant Command Plan. It's reviewed every 2 years. Okay, and it is during that review you determine either you are increasing the number of commands, either you are adjusting their area of responsibility, or what weapons and platforms you are bringing on board. What all of that is not. Usually, it's not supposed to be one man's decision. It's not supposed to be somebody just deciding to put one institution in his village somewhere. No, that's not how militaries are run. So those are some of the what I call the higher defense management tools and instruments that need to be put in place. There are about 22 different such instruments. If you follow the US example, that we have some of them in ours, but we need to have more so that these decisions are holistic, they are taken at the highest level, the financial implications are known, and they are catered for in the budget. And then, of course, it ties even with the foreign policy of the country. So foreign policy, defense policy, all of those things was tied together as to what the nation is trying to do in projecting power and all of that. Right, that's how it should work.
It's an ongoing conversation. Apparently, we cannot stop talking about the issue of national security, because that is where everything starts and ends. With security, we can develop, our economy can grow, we can strive, we can survive, and we can even record success in as many things that we want to be. When people know that they go to bed, they wake up, they travel on the road, they are safe, and all of that. So I must thank you so much, General Henry Ayola, a retired Army General. Thank you so much for coming on the program, for your perspective as well. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Bukola and Jeff.
Well, we will switch gears now to other things, and we will now head back to the United States, but right here from Lagos. The elections have been called. Donald Trump is president-elect, 47th president of the United States. Come January, he will be sworn in, I think, around the 20th or so. What does this mean for the Nigerians in the States and those of us outside the States in terms of foreign policy and the global peace? That's what we'll be talking about after the break. Join us again.